She sent me a violation notice not once, but 3 times, when $500 in total. The reason? The very fence I had personally signed off on and permitted. She thought she was playing chess, but she didn't know I was holding the entire chessboard. Ethan Carter had a job that required him to face human arrogance every day, and he was good at it. As a county building inspector in one of the rapidly expanding suburban jurisdictions, his work wasn't just about measuring the height of scaffolding or checking the depth of foundations. His job was to ensure that law and code were upheld, protecting the public from unsafe construction and negligent contractors. He was the gatekeeper, an expert on rules and permits, and the man whose signature adorned hundreds of official sealed documents, including the official permit file for his own new cedar fence. That fence, a standard 6-foot privacy structure, was a project Ethan had personally planned, measured, and built over 3 successive weekends. It was a proud feature, a statement of privacy, and a project that was absolutely perfect by county standards, the standards he enforced. The trouble arrived on a hot Tuesday afternoon. Ethan was compiling a complex report on a zoning violation when the mail came. It was a thin, stiff envelope with the embossed logo of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, HOA. A faint smirk crossed his lips, for he already knew who the sender was before he tore the envelope open. Inside was a document, heavily emphasized, titled Notice of Violation. The fine, $500. The reason: inconsistent height and material with the HOA's approved landscape design, specifically overheight fencing. Ethan leaned back in his office chair. $500 for a fence he had built in perfect compliance with both county code and HOA rules. He had carefully read and followed the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC&Rs, not because he feared fines, but because he respected the code. The code clearly stated privacy fences shall not exceed 6 feet. His was exactly 6 feet. Furthermore, he had submitted his plans and received written approval from the HOA's architectural committee, signed by someone named Brenda. Brenda Peterson was the woman the entire neighborhood referred to as Karen behind her back. She wasn't just the HOA board president. She was personified controlling storm. Brenda was the type who would stand at her window with a coffee cup, timing whether your trash can was pulled in before 8 p.m. She thrived on the small, unchecked power that the position offered. For Brenda, rules weren't meant to maintain order. Rules were weapons to assert her perceived moral and aesthetic superiority. She was the archetype of self-appointed sanctimony, the one who believed there was a standard, and that standard always rested above everyone else. Ethan tossed the notice onto his desk, feeling a tinge of weary frustration rather than anger. He wasn't a confrontation seeker. He liked efficiency and legal correctness. He pulled his fence file from the desk drawer, a green folder labeled My Fence, and opened it to the page bearing Brenda Peterson's signature approving the design. He intended to write a polite, detailed letter of rebuttal, attach the proof of approval, and call the matter settled, but Brenda Peterson was not one to back down gracefully. 6 days later, another notice arrived. Escalated fine, $750 for non-compliance after initial notice of violation and non-responsive behavior. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Non-responsive. He hadn't even responded yet. She had crossed the line from petty nuisance into clear abuse of power. He flipped through the CC&Rs again, not focusing on the fence this time, but on the fining procedure. He began to make notes. Section 3(b). All violation notices must be issued following a recorded committee vote. Section 4(d). All appeals must be reviewed in an executive session before escalated penalties are applied. In neither of the two notices was there any mention of a vote or a meeting. Just Brenda Peterson's signature, one person. That night, while Ethan was still reading the HOA bylaws, a third fine notice was slipped into his door jamb, clearly hand-delivered. Final penalty before legal action, $250, total, $1,500. The threat was unmistakable. Ethan was no longer annoyed. He felt a cold, sharp focus that he usually reserved for contractors trying to sneak past safety codes. This Karen wasn't just trying to fine him. She was violating the very legal process she was sworn to uphold. She was acting as judge, jury, and executioner without the legal authority to do so. Ethan stood up, walking to his spare desk. He didn't pull out the fence file. Instead, he opened a locked drawer and retrieved another much thicker binder bearing the official county seal. It contained code manuals, official complaint forms, and contact lists. She wants to play the game of those who hold power, Ethan muttered, his voice calm and steely. She doesn't know that I'm not just a neighbor. I'm the man who writes the rules for this stuff, and I know every legal loophole, every proper procedure, and every government agency that can make her pay for this abuse of authority. He looked down at the final notice. $2,500. No, this wasn't just about the fence anymore. This was about clever legal retribution. This was about teaching a petty tyrant a lesson in justice the way only a county inspector could. Ethan picked up his phone, but not to call the HOA. He called a colleague, the chief county inspector. Hey, I've got a small personal issue at home, but it has some deep legal implications regarding HOA governance that I think our department might want to look into. Specifically, abuse of power and financial audit issues. I may need to officially run a few checks on this neighborhood. The third hand-delivered notice, declaring the $1,500 cumulative fine, was the pivot point. For Brenda Peterson, the HOA president, it was the final intimidating salvo meant to force compliance. For Ethan Carter, the county building inspector, it was a declaration of war, a war he was prepared to fight with bureaucracy and legal meticulousness. Ethan didn't waste time on angry phone calls or heated emails. His job had taught him that emotion clouds judgment, and judgment was his sharpest weapon. He treated the HOA's demands like he would an unapproved construction blueprint, something fundamentally flawed that needed to be dismantled piece by piece. Starting with the foundation, he requested, via certified mail, ensuring a clear paper trail, a complete copy of the HOA's governing documents, including the most recent amendments to the CC&Rs, the official meeting minutes for the last 12 months, and the board's official fining procedure policy. This was his right as a homeowner, and he knew they couldn't legally refuse the request, though he fully expected them to stall. Brenda predictably stalled. She responded 2 weeks later with a curt email stating that, due to the homeowner's active state of violation, the documents would only be provided after a full payment of the outstanding fees. Ethan smiled coldly. This was a classic Karen move, weaponizing bureaucracy and attempting to hold public documents hostage. But Ethan didn't rely solely on their cooperation. He knew where to find these documents. As a county inspector, he was deeply familiar with the municipal requirements for HOAs to file their foundational documents with the county recorder's office. He called his administrative assistant at the county office and, using his official capacity, requested a pull of the Willow Creek HOA's publicly filed Articles of Incorporation and the initial CC&Rs. While waiting for the official copies, Ethan turned his attention to the documents he already had, the 3 flimsy fine notices. He noticed the dates. The first notice was dated October 10th. The second, October 16th. The third, hand-delivered, was October 19th. 3 fines, all escalating, within 9 days. He pulled up the HOA's publicly available calendar. Monthly board meetings were held on the first Monday of the month. The Architectural Review Committee, ARC, met on the third Wednesday. Let's see, he muttered, tapping a pen on his desk pad. The first notice was issued on a Tuesday, October 10th. The second notice was a Monday, October 16th. The third was a Thursday, October 19th. He compared this to the HOA's own rules, which he recalled from memory and now confirmed in the initial CC&Rs from the County CC&R Article 5. Section 2, Imposition of Fines. A fine may only be issued upon a formal vote by the ARC, ratified by the Board of Directors during a scheduled meeting. A subsequent escalated fine may only be issued if the violation persists for at least 30 days following the initial notice and after a formal re-inspection. He checked the dates again. 9 days, not 30. No evidence of a re-inspection, and most damningly, the only scheduled meeting between October 10th and October 19th was the ARC meeting on October 18th. If the meeting happened on the 18th, how could the fine be issued on the 10th and the 16th? And why was the third fine issued the day after the meeting? But the amount was only $250, lower than the second. The whole pattern was arbitrary and nonsensical, a clear sign that the fines were being issued ad hoc by one person. The official documents arrived from the county recorder's office. Ethan spent an evening reading through the dense, legalese-laden paper. The key flaw wasn't just in the fining procedure. It was in the ARC composition, Bylaw Article 4, Section 1, Architectural Review Committee. The ARC shall consist of no fewer than three active non-board member homeowners, appointed by the board and serving 2-year terms. Ethan checked the HOA's most recent annual report, a skimpy document filed haphazardly. It listed only 2 names for the ARC, Brenda Peterson, chairperson, listed as an ex officio board member, and a non-board member named David Jenkins. Ethan whispered. The ARC was illegally constituted. It required 3 non-board members. Brenda, as board president, should only serve as an ex officio, non-voting member, if at all. By listing herself as the chairperson and only having 1 other member, she had been running the entire architectural review process, including approving Ethan's fence in the first place, with an illegal committee. Her initial approval of his fence was legally tenuous, but her subsequent fine was an absolute procedural nullity. He had found the fatal flaw. Brenda hadn't just made a mistake about the fence height. She had been operating an essential committee outside the bounds of the community's own laws, meaning every fine she had issued and every approval she had granted in the last year was potentially invalid. The satisfaction was palpable. This wasn't about a $2,500 fine anymore. This was a structural failure in governance exposed by a 6-foot cedar fence. Ethan drafted a meticulously formal letter of appeal, but he didn't send it yet. The next step wasn't a private correspondence. It was a public confrontation. He needed the neighborhood to witness the hypocrisy firsthand. He underlined the date of the next general HOA meeting in red, November 5th. She wanted a fight over a fence, Ethan mused, leaning back and looking at his perfect permitted fence through the window. She's about to get an audit of her entire operation. The Willow Creek HOA general meeting on November 5th was held in the community clubhouse, a space usually reserved for birthday parties and fitness classes. The air was thick with the silent tension that plagues most suburban governance gatherings, a mixture of boredom, resentment, and the quiet hope that this would be the meeting where someone finally stood up to Brenda. Ethan arrived precisely 5 minutes before the start time, carrying a nondescript briefcase. He wore a crisp dress shirt, the kind he wore when conducting serious county inspections, instead of the typical homeowner's casual attire. He sat toward the back, observing the room. Brenda Peterson, seated at the head table, was the picture of self-importance. She wore a tailored blazer and an air of beleaguered authority, sighing dramatically as she reviewed her notes. She greeted her few allies with overly familiar smiles and ignored everyone else. Tonight, she clearly viewed Ethan not just as a homeowner, but as a minor criminal whose public execution would serve as a powerful warning to the rest of the community. The meeting began with a tedious review of the budget and the approval of the previous month's minutes. Ethan remained silent, watching the clock. Finally, they reached the section titled Old Business Compliance and Violations. Brenda cleared her throat, adjusting her microphone slightly too close to her mouth, causing a small grating feedback noise. All right, let's move to the unpleasant but necessary item of community standards enforcement, she announced, her voice dripping with sanctimony. We have an outstanding serious compliance issue regarding the property at 4725 Cedar Drive. The homeowner, Mr. Carter, has chosen to build an aesthetically non-compliant, overheight fence, completely disregarding the Architectural Committee's guidelines and repeated notices. She paused, deliberately sweeping her eyes over the room, letting the implied judgment settle on Ethan. We issued 3 warnings and fines totaling $1,500, $500 due to his non-responsiveness. In clear defiance, she continued, Mr. Carter has requested a formal appeal tonight, which we are happy to grant him 5 minutes to present. Though, frankly, the case is open and shut. She turned a condescending smile toward Ethan. Mr. Carter, please approach the podium. Try to keep it brief. Ethan rose slowly, calmly, his movements deliberate. As he walked past the rows of neighbors, several averted their gaze, not wanting to be associated with the defiant homeowner. He placed his briefcase on the podium and adjusted the microphone, pulling it back a few inches from his mouth. His voice was steady, professional, and entirely devoid of heat. Thank you, Madam President, Ethan began, using the formal title that seemed to irritate her slightly. My name is Ethan Carter, and I'm here tonight not to appeal the substance of the fine, but to challenge the legality of the enforcement process itself. Brenda interjected immediately, her tone sharp. Mr. Carter, the substance is the height of your fence. The rule is 6 feet. Yours appears to be taller. End of discussion. With respect, Madam President, the discussion is just beginning, Ethan replied, his eyes locked on her. He opened his briefcase and pulled out the thin stack of papers, the 3 fine notices and the HOA's own CC&Rs, which he had highlighted extensively. I have here my initial construction permit, approved by the Architectural Review Committee on September 28th, bearing the signature of Brenda Peterson, chairperson, Ethan stated, holding up the document for the room to see the signature block. This document explicitly approves a 6-foot cedar fence, verifying that the design and material are compliant. A ripple of low murmuring went through the audience. Brenda's face tightened. That was a preliminary approval, Mr. Carter. The final construction does not match the spirit of the guidelines. Spirit is not a legal metric, Madam President, Ethan countered, his voice gaining a precise authority. Law is. Let's examine the law. He flipped the page. I received the first fine on October 10th, the second escalated fine on October 16th, the third final fine on October 19th. 3 fines totaling $1,500, issued in 9 days. Ethan then quoted directly from the governing documents, his voice ringing with the clarity of a judge reading a verdict. CC&R Article 5, Section 2, states that an escalated fine may only be issued if the violation persists for 30 days following the initial notice, and only after a formal reinspection by the ARC. He paused, letting the 30-day timeline hang in the air. I received the second fine in 6 days, the third in 9 days. There was no reinspection report attached, nor was there a formal reinspection scheduled. He looked directly at Brenda, who was now visibly flustered, her tailored composure crumbling. This means, Madam President, that the escalated fines of $750 and $250 were issued in direct violation of the association's own binding covenants. They are, legally speaking, null and void. But Ethan wasn't finished. He moved to the most critical point, the systemic failure he had uncovered in Part 2. Furthermore, the CC&Rs state that a fine must be voted upon and ratified by a legally constituted committee, Ethan continued, pulling out the official bylaw and reading the section on the ARC composition. Bylaw Article 4, Section 1. The Architectural Review Committee shall consist of no fewer than three active, non-board member homeowners. He turned to the room, not Brenda. According to the latest minutes filed with the county, the ARC currently consists of Brenda Peterson, who is a board member, and 1 other homeowner. The ARC is therefore illegally constituted. If the committee is illegal, then every single fine, every single approval, and every single decision issued by the ARC since its composition became non-compliant is legally invalid. Brenda slammed her hand on the table. That is completely out of line, Mr. Carter. You are attacking the very structure of this community. No, Madam President, I am defending the rule of law within this community. Ethan corrected her, his gaze unwavering. You created the rules. I simply pointed out that you, and only you, have broken them repeatedly in your zeal to penalize a compliant fence. Ethan placed the fine notices back into his briefcase, zipping it shut. He hadn't raised his voice and he hadn't insulted her, but he had systematically dismantled her authority using her own rule book. The room was silent, the neighbors now looking at Brenda with a new, critical awareness. I formally request that all fines totaling $1,500 be immediately rescinded due to procedural nullity, Ethan finished. And I suggest the board immediately rectify the illegal composition of the ARC before its past decisions invite legal challenges from other homeowners. He gave a small, curt nod to the room and walked back to his seat, leaving Brenda Peterson staring at the empty podium, her face a mask of furious, exposed hypocrisy. The seeds of community uprising had been planted. The aftermath of the general meeting was not the quiet surrender Ethan had hoped for. The public exposure of Brenda's procedural violations had only stoked her fire, transforming her fury into a desperate need for absolute control. She couldn't admit defeat. Admitting defeat meant admitting her power was illegitimate. 2 days after the meeting, Ethan received a thick manila envelope, far more official-looking than the previous fine notices. It was a formal cease and desist order, drafted hastily by the HOA's lawyer, a contact Ethan suspected Brenda had called in a panic. The letter stated, in aggressive boilerplate legalese, that while the board was reviewing the procedural claims, the fence still constituted an unapproved structure that violates the aesthetic harmony of the community. It demanded that Ethan either modify the fence's height to 5 feet or completely remove it within 7 days, or the HOA would proceed with a lawsuit seeking injunctive relief and demanding Ethan pay all accrued legal costs. The threat was explicit. Remove your fence or pay our lawyers to force you to. Ethan read the letter at his kitchen counter, sipping his morning coffee. It was a predictable escalation. Brenda was doubling down, hoping a legal threat would intimidate Ethan into submission, proving to the neighborhood that her authority, even if flawed, still reigned supreme. He didn't panic. He saw the cease and desist not as a threat, but as the lawyer's desperate attempt to clean up Brenda's mess. Ethan knew that their legal standing was shaky at best, given the illegal composition of the ARC that issued the original approval and the fines. But now, Ethan realized it was time to move beyond defense and begin setting the trap using his true authority. He wasn't going to sue the HOA. He was going to invite the county to audit them. That morning, Ethan arrived at his county office, not as a homeowner seeking justice, but as a seasoned inspector performing his duties. He called up the county planning and zoning director, a man named Mr. Harrison, whom Ethan had worked with for years. Mr. Harrison, I have a situation in the Willow Creek jurisdiction, Ethan began, keeping his tone measured and professional. It's related to a personal property dispute, but it has exposed a rather serious systemic breakdown in the HOA's compliance oversight. He didn't mention the fence directly. Instead, he framed the issue as a public safety concern. Based on the documents I reviewed, their Architectural Review Committee, ARC, has been illegally constituted for over a year. Consequently, every new build, addition, and significant structural change they've approved might not have received proper municipal scrutiny. The real concern is that if they can't follow their own bylaws, they are likely rubber-stamping projects that violate county safety and permitting codes. Mr. Harrison listened intently. The county was highly sensitive to liability issues arising from unpermitted construction. Which projects are you concerned about, Ethan? Harrison asked. I need to cross-reference their approval list with our permits, Ethan replied. I'm initiating a routine compliance review of all major exterior modifications approved by the Willow Creek HOA in the last 18 months. I want to check for discrepancies, unpermitted decks, non-compliant setbacks, improperly installed retaining walls, the works. If their internal process is broken, we need to step in to protect public safety. Harrison agreed immediately. A systemic failure in an HOA's review process was a major red flag for the county. Ethan officially submitted the request. A blanket review of all new permits issued in the Willow Creek subdivision against the HOA's internally filed approval documents. This was a completely legitimate action based on his job, but its true purpose was tactical, to create massive, unavoidable administrative work and legal exposure for the HOA, and specifically for the person who had been rubber-stamping these illegal approvals, Brenda Peterson. The next few days, Ethan worked silently. He didn't respond to the cease and desist. He simply went to his county office and began his routine compliance review. He discovered several red flags. A newly built second-story balcony on Maple Lane, approved by the HOA, but lacking a required county structural permit. A large shed on Oak Drive that violated the county's setback regulations, which Brenda had nonetheless signed off on. A recently paved driveway that had altered the neighborhood's stormwater runoff drainage plan, a major county violation. All these projects had one thing in common. They were approved by the illegally constituted ARC, often bearing Brenda's hurried signature. Ethan wasn't just defending his fence anymore. He was building a case for gross negligence and malfeasance against the HOA leadership. The power fantasy was taking shape. Brenda thought she was fighting a neighbor over a $1,500 fine. She was actually about to face a full-scale legal audit from the very governmental body Ethan worked for. He printed out the documentation for the Maple Lane balcony, the most egregious safety violation. This, he knew, was the key to Part 5. He wouldn't show up at Brenda's door in his casual neighbor clothes again. He would show up in his county uniform, carrying an official notice of violation for a safety hazard that Brenda herself had carelessly authorized. Ethan looked at the cease and desist order on his counter. He finally responded, but not to the HOA lawyer. He typed a short, ice-cold email to the entire HOA board to Willow Creek HOA Board of Directors. Subject, Cease and desist order. I have received your letter dated November 7th. Please be advised that I am unable to comply with the order at this time. The legal standing of this demand is highly questionable, given the systemic and ongoing procedural violations of the HOA's governing documents. Recommend the board immediately focus its attention on rectifying the illegal composition of the Architectural Review Committee and preparing for a potential review by the County Planning and Zoning Department, who have recently been made aware of multiple possible unpermitted constructions within Willow Creek. Sincerely, Ethan Carter, homeowner at 4725 Cedar Drive. He hit send. The vague, unsettling threat about potential review by the county would be the first tremor of the earthquake. The email Ethan sent to the HOA board, vaguely referencing a potential review by the County Planning and Zoning Department, had the intended effect. It threw Brenda into a state of nervous, reactive chaos. Instead of addressing the systemic failures Ethan had highlighted, she began a frantic campaign to find and correct any small, easily fixable violation in the neighborhood to show the county, if they ever showed up, that the HOA was functioning. However, the real trouble wasn't a minor yard infraction. It was the major safety violation Ethan had uncovered during his routine compliance review, the unpermitted second-story balcony on Maple Lane, owned by the Millers. The Millers had relied solely on Brenda's ARC approval, blissfully unaware that the structure lacked the required county permit and structural engineering inspection. 2 weeks after sending his warning email, Ethan was sitting at his county desk when the call came in. It was a frantic message from a concerned Willow Creek resident, not Ethan, reporting shaky construction on a second-story balcony after heavy rain. The resident, who happened to be next door to the Millers, was worried about structural integrity. Mr. Harrison, the chief county inspector, assigned the case to the most knowledgeable inspector for the Willow Creek district. That inspector was, of course, Ethan Carter. This was the opportunity. Not a staged meeting, but an official, unavoidable summons rooted in public safety. Ethan shed his homeowner persona entirely. He put on his official, crisp county uniform, complete with the embroidered patch and the county ID badge clipped to his breast pocket. He grabbed his clipboard, his official inspection camera, and a stack of bright orange notice of violation placards. He was going to Maple Lane as the law, not as the neighbor Brenda fined. He drove his unmarked county vehicle into the Willow Creek subdivision. As he pulled up to the Miller's house, he saw the predictable sight: Brenda Peterson standing on the sidewalk, already looking agitated. She hadn't been called by the county, but she had certainly been called by the Millers, who were terrified that her approval was about to cost them thousands. Brenda, recognizing the unmarked official car, strode toward Ethan with purpose and that trademark, condescending tone she reserved for anyone she considered below her. She was in full defense mode. "Can I help you, officer?" she asked, using the term officer dismissively, clearly thinking he was some low-level enforcement agent who could be easily redirected. Ethan stepped out of the car. He did not acknowledge her beyond a brief glance. He was all business. "County Building Inspector Carter," he stated, his voice flat and formal, showing her his badge briefly. "I'm responding to an urgent structural complaint regarding this property." "Are you the homeowner?" Brenda puffed up, pleased to assert her authority. "No, I am the president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, Brenda Peterson. I handle all architectural matters here. What seems to be the issue? We approved this balcony and everything here is to our standard." Ethan ignored the last part. He walked past her, focused entirely on the Miller's property. "The issue, Ms. Peterson, is structural integrity and public safety. We have received a report of unpermitted, potentially unsafe construction." He began his inspection of the balcony, methodically taking photos of the foundation posts, noting the inadequate bracing, and checking the size of the lumber against the basic safety code, all while Brenda trailed behind him, attempting to micromanage the process. "It's just a neighbor squabble." "Inspector Carter," Brenda hissed under her breath. "Probably that petty man, Mr. Carter from Cedar Drive, trying to stir up trouble because we had to fine him over his fence. He's very difficult, always fighting the rules. Ethan stopped, his back to her, and noted the inadequate tie-downs on the ledger board. He felt the pure, exquisite satisfaction of the moment. He was hearing the antagonist's narrative directly, while she unknowingly stood right next to the person she was defaming. "Is that so, Ms. Peterson?" Ethan said, turning his attention back to his clipboard, making notes. "Well, I'm here to enforce the laws of the county, not the internal squabbles of a private association. The fact remains this structure lacks a mandatory county structural permit and inspection record, but we approved it," Brenda insisted, her voice rising. "I personally signed the approval form for the Millers. They submitted everything we asked for." Ethan turned around fully, his face neutral. Holding the bright orange violation placard in one hand and the Millers' flimsy HOA approval form, which he had obtained during his review, in the other. "Ms. Peterson," Ethan said. The pause before his next words stretched the moment to its limit. "Your signature on this document is completely irrelevant to the safety and legality of this structure. The HOA approval is separate from and subservient to county code." He stared at her, letting the silence build. Brenda looked confused, then defensive. Then slowly, a flicker of uneasy recognition crossed her face. She looked at his face, the precise angles, the focused eyes, the determined set of his jaw, the very face she had condescendingly dismissed at the HOA meeting. But this man wore a uniform. Ethan then took the final deliberate step. He lowered his gaze to the official papers in his hands and then back up to hers. "And regarding the petty man, Mr. Carter from Cedar Drive, whom you claim is difficult and always fighting the rules." Ethan paused, a slow, predatory calm in his voice. He took the official notice of violation placard and firmly affixed it to the balcony post. "You are absolutely correct. Ms. Peterson, he is very difficult." He met her eyes, the moment of revelation hitting her with the force of a physical blow. He gestured to the uniform and the clipboard, his voice dropping to a dangerously low register. "But you are mistaken about one thing. I don't just know the rules for the county, Ms. Peterson. I am the one who enforces them. My name is Ethan Carter. I am the owner of the fence you find, and I am now officially issuing a stop work order and a county violation notice on a structure you negligently approved." Brenda's jaw went slack. The self-assured Karen mask shattered, replaced by raw shock and panic. The county inspector she was trying to bully was the neighbor she had targeted. The power fantasy was complete. She had just publicly defamed a county official who was now holding the full legal authority of the government over the jurisdiction she controlled. "I think, Ms. Peterson," Ethan concluded, stepping away from the property, "we have more important things to discuss now than my 6-foot cedar fence." Brenda Peterson stood frozen on the roadside, staring at the bright orange notice of violation placard Ethan had just affixed to the Miller's balcony. She couldn't reconcile the image before her. This man whom she had publicly shamed, whom she had bullied with threatening letters and baseless fines, was standing before her in full governmental uniform, wielding absolute legal authority. The Karen facade crumbled. Arrogance gave way to primal fear, the kind of fear felt by petty tyrants when confronted with a power source larger, more organized, and demonstrably lawful than their own. "No, this isn't possible," Brenda stammered, her voice thin and weak, completely unlike her usual imperious tone. You're the man from Cedar Drive? You can't be a county inspector? That's a conflict of interest. You're trying to get revenge." Ethan turned to face Brenda, maintaining a professional distance. He had no intention of making her feel better. "First, Ms. Peterson," Ethan stated, his voice as cold as steel, devoid of any personal emotion. "My name is Ethan Carter. I am the county building inspector assigned to this jurisdiction. I responded to a public safety report and I am executing my duties. It is not a conflict of interest. It is an unfortunate coincidence for you, as it exposes your profound dereliction of duty." He gestured toward the Miller's balcony. "Second, this structure is a public safety hazard. It lacks mandatory structural anchors and was never issued a county building permit or inspection. You, as the chairperson of the Architectural Review Committee, signed off on it, encouraging the homeowner to violate county law." Brenda took a step back, desperately trying to regain the upper hand. But your fence, you built it. It's over height. It still violates the HOA rules." This was the moment. Ethan unlocked his briefcase, not his neighborly satchel, but his official county-issued documentation case. He pulled out 2 separate files, one thin green folder. and one thick file bearing the county seal. "Let's talk about my fence, Ms. Peterson," Ethan said, placing both files side by side on the roof of his county vehicle. He opened the first file, the thin green one, his personal submission for the privacy fence. "This is my submission to the HOA, height 6 feet. Material cedar. Approval date, September 28th, he pointed to her signature. "And here is your signature, Brenda Peterson, ARC chairperson, granting full approval for the work. This proves I followed your procedure." Then, Ethan opened the second official county file. He flipped to the page bearing the stamped approval. "And this is the county building permit issued for my address. The 6-foot fence is in full compliance with all county height and setback regulations." He locked eyes with her, his voice carrying the full weight of law and fact. The power fantasy climax. "You issued me 3 separate fines, illegally threatened me, and abused your petty authority to try and force me to tear down a structure that is perfectly legal and structurally sound. You fined me for the very structure that I, as a county building inspector, personally signed off on and permitted myself." Brenda's jaw dropped. She had wasted the HOA's time and money pursuing a fully compliant homeowner who turned out to be the government official whose jurisdiction oversaw the community's building standards. Ethan flipped the county file back open, now moving decisively from defense to prosecution. "The issue is no longer my fence," Ethan continued. "The issue is your systemic abuse of power. You violated the CC&Rs by 1, issuing escalated fines in less than 30 days without a formal reinspection, and 2, operating with an illegally constituted architectural review committee for over a year, in serious violation of Article 4, Section 1 of the HOA's own bylaws." He held up the county file, emphasizing the difference in authority. "My fence is safe and legal. This balcony, which you negligently approved, is not. Your actions have created a potential safety hazard." Ethan took a step closer to her, just enough to be intimidating. "And here is what you need to understand, Ms. Peterson. When you abuse HOA power to retaliate against a citizen, you automatically invite county intervention. My presence here today isn't just about the balcony. I am conducting an official compliance review of this entire subdivision, focusing on all projects you approved while your committee was illegal. Our county cannot ignore the possibility that dozens of unsafe structures may exist in this community due to negligent oversight. You thought you were fighting a neighbor. You are now facing governmental inspection procedure." Brenda stumbled backward, tears welling up from helplessness. "You can't do this, I'll call the HOA lawyer. You'll be sued for harassment." Ethan pointed to the orange placard on the balcony. "Your lawyer will advise you to worry about the Miller balcony first. I will be submitting a detailed report to the HOA board, recommending a full procedural and financial audit because these flagrant violations indicate a far more serious lack of governance. Have a pleasant day." Ethan turned and got back into his county vehicle, leaving Brenda Peterson alone, stunned and trembling beside the evidence of her own catastrophic misuse of authority. The fight was over, and the victory was achieved with the perfect legal twist. The judge was fined by his own victim. The revelation at the Miller's property, Part 6, was the psychological blow. Part 7 was the legal knockout. Ethan wasted no time capitalizing on Brenda Peterson's shock and loss of control. He knew the HOA board, still heavily influenced by Brenda's fear-mongering and their own self-interest, would try to contain the damage quietly. Ethan wouldn't let them. He returned to his office and immediately finalized his official county report regarding the Willow Creek subdivision. The report meticulously detailed the unpermitted balcony, the code violations, and, crucially, the systemic breakdown in the HOA's Architectural Review Committee, ARC, that had allowed the hazard to be created. However, Ethan's real counterpunch wasn't the county violation. It was the formal complaint he filed as a homeowner against the HOA, leveraging his internal knowledge of legal procedure. He drafted a formal, multi-page complaint for declaratory and injunctive relief addressed to the appropriate county oversight body for nonprofit entities, which HOAs usually fall under, and copied the entire Willow Creek HOA board and their external counsel. Complaint was a masterclass in legal precision. The factual basis of illegal fines. Ethan laid out the $2,500 in fines against his fence, attaching copies of Brenda's written approval, the county permit, and the HOA's own CC&Rs. He demonstrated that the fines were issued fraudulently and arbitrarily, violating the 30-day waiting period and the inspection requirements of Article 5, Section 2.2, the illegal committee structure. This was the core of the attack. Ethan cited Bylaw Article 4, Section 1, which required 3 non-board member homeowners for the ARC. He presented the evidence, the poorly filed annual reports and meeting minutes showing the ARC was functionally illegal and run solely by Brenda. This fact, he asserted, invalidated all architectural decisions made in the last 18 months, opening the HOA up to massive liability. The abuse of authority and financial misconduct. This was the most damaging section, linking Brenda's arbitrary fining to financial mismanagement. Ethan pointed out that the HOA's legal counsel had been engaged to issue a cease and desist against a fully compliant homeowner, Ethan, likely resulting in unnecessary legal fees paid with HOA funds. He formally requested a full, independent, and forensic audit of the HOA's financial records. Excerpt from Ethan's complaint. The plaintiff, Ethan Carter, asserts that the arbitrary and unlawful issuance of fines and the documented procedural negligence of the board president, Brenda Peterson, raises serious questions regarding the fiduciary responsibility of the entire board. Specifically, the use of association funds to pursue unlawful litigation against a compliant member necessitates an immediate, comprehensive external audit to ensure transparency and prevent further misuse of homeowner dues. By filing this complaint, Ethan successfully shifted the legal narrative. It was no longer about offense. It was about the integrity of the HOA's governance and finances. The board's lawyer, upon receiving the complaint, immediately recognized the gravity of the situation. The firm had been hired to manage simple compliance, not defend against a charge of systemic malfeasance backed by government documents. The lawyer advised the board to immediately rescind all fines against Mr. Carter. Ethan, with a written apology, suspend all Architectural Review Committee, ARC activities, until a legally constituted committee could be formed, cooperate fully with any request for a financial audit. Brenda, of course, fought the recommendation fiercely, calling the lawyer a coward and accusing Ethan of a smear campaign. But the rest of the board, suddenly facing the prospect of being personally named in a lawsuit and having their financial mismanagement exposed, began to distance themselves from her. The first tangible victory arrived 2 days later. A formal letter from the HOA secretary, signed grudgingly by Brenda as president, was delivered to Ethan's mailbox. Dear Mr. Carter, please accept this formal apology from the Willow Creek HOA board. Due to procedural discrepancies, we are immediately rescinding the cumulative fines of $1,500 issued regarding your property. A check for any funds previously paid will be issued immediately. Furthermore, we acknowledge receipt of your complaint and have scheduled an emergency executive session to address the structural issues you have raised. We appreciate your attention to these matters. Ethan smiled as he read the apology. It was thin, bureaucratic, and utterly lacking in sincerity, but it was a formal admission of defeat. The fines were gone. The threat of legal action against his fence was nullified. The fence was safe. But the war for structural justice had just begun. Ethan had forced the board's hand, demanding an audit. The final, most powerful legal counterpunch that would inevitably lead to Brenda's forced removal. The community was about to see the real cost of unchecked authority. The forced concession by the HOA board, the written apology, and the rescission of the fines did little to calm the waters. Instead, it served as concrete proof that Brenda Peterson's reign was built on procedural quicksand. The immediate impact was felt not just in the boardroom, but in the digital town square, the neighborhood's private online forum and community social media groups. Ethan, maintaining his professional distance, didn't post anything himself. He didn't need to. The news of the county inspector revealing himself as the fined neighbor and the subsequent lawsuit threat spread like wildfire. The first thread appeared under the title, "The Fence Fiasco, Our HOA Board Lied and Paid the Price." Homeowners who had long suffered under Brenda's petty tyranny finally found their voice. Ethan's success, achieved not through shouting or vandalism, but through meticulous legal diligence, gave them the courage to speak up. Old man Jerry. I knew that woman was trouble. She fined me $200 last year because my mailbox color was too vibrant. I just paid it to make her go away. Now I demand my money back. concerned Mom 44. She denied my request for a simple children's play structure, claiming it impeded the view corridor. Turns out she was just mad I didn't invite her daughter to my block party. Can we sue her for emotional damages? The Millers, Maple Lane. We are now facing thousands in reconstruction costs because the HOA President, Brenda Peterson, signed off on an illegal balcony. We trusted her. Mr. Carter is a hero for exposing this. The online forum quickly became a flood of grievances, transforming into a digital archive of Brenda's abuses, arbitrary denials, bullying emails, suspicious votes, and the general atmosphere of fear she had cultivated. The board members, other than Brenda, were now in full panic mode. They recognized that the impending financial audit, triggered by Ethan's formal complaint in Part 7, would expose not only Brenda's misuse of funds, but also their own passive complicity. Meanwhile, Ethan received countless private emails and phone calls. Neighbors weren't asking for legal advice. They were offering evidence. A homeowner on Park Drive forwarded Ethan a crucial email thread. It showed Brenda instructing the former ARC secretary, who had since moved away, to backdate meeting minutes to make it appear that a unanimous vote had occurred on a sensitive landscaping issue, a clear act of fraud. Another neighbor, who worked in finance, offered the most damning piece of information. They noticed a recurring expense in the publicly available vague HOA budget line item, $150 monthly for administrative services. This neighbor discovered that the $150 was being deposited directly into a private bank account held by Brenda Peterson for personal time and effort, despite the fact that the HOA president role was strictly volunteer. While $150 wasn't massive, it was a clear violation of the non-compensation clauses in the HOA's bylaws and confirmed the financial malfeasance Ethan had suspected. Armed with this surge of community evidence, Ethan upgraded his approach. He contacted the independent forensic accounting firm that the HOA lawyer had grudgingly hired. I have supporting documentation regarding potential fraudulent expense claims and falsification of official records. Ethan informed the lead accountant, maintaining his professional tone. I will be submitting these materials along with sworn affidavits from multiple homeowners to supplement your audit. This is no longer a simple accounting review. It is a full investigation into potential fraud. The accountants, now motivated by a clear mandate and legal risk, sharpened their focus. The atmosphere in Willow Creek shifted dramatically. Neighbors who were once afraid to even wave at Brenda now pointedly ignored her. She was spotted pacing in her yard, visibly stressed, screaming into her cell phone, attempting to coordinate a counterattack that was already doomed. Brenda tried one last desperate move. She attempted to call a special emergency meeting of the board to vote on formally, censuring Ethan for disrupting community harmony and unethically using his government position for personal gain. This attempt backfired spectacularly. The board, terrified of the audit and the public backlash, refused to even attend the meeting. The rest of the neighborhood viewed it as the final, pathetic gasp of a dying dictatorship. The community had risen, not with pitchforks, but with emails, sworn statements, and the collective desire for due process. Ethan had shown them that the most satisfying form of justice is achieved by meticulously following the very rules the tyrant breaks. The stage was now set for the final reckoning, which the inevitable audit would provide. The financial audit, initiated reluctantly by the terrified HOA board and fueled by the evidence provided by Ethan and the community, Part 8, lasted 2 agonizing weeks for Brenda Peterson. For Ethan, it was simply the inevitable conclusion to a poorly executed power grab. The external forensic accounting firm, armed with the backdated meeting minutes and the proof of the unauthorized $150 monthly administrative services payment, delivered its findings during a special mandatory executive session. Ethan, as the plaintiff who initiated the complaint, was invited to attend and present his original findings. Brenda, despite protesting vehemently that the meeting was illegal and a witch hunt, was legally required to be there. The atmosphere in the clubhouse was heavy, far different from the tense energy of the previous general meeting. The 6 board members sat stiffly, avoiding eye contact with Brenda. The lead accountant, Mr. Thompson, began his presentation with cold, factual precision. We have identified multiple severe procedural and financial irregularities within the Willow Creek HOA. primarily concentrated within the ARC and presidential discretionary spending, Thompson stated. He started with the procedural violations that Ethan had already exposed, confirming that the ARC had been illegally constituted for 18 months, rendering countless decisions invalid. Then, he moved to the financial abuse, the core of the justice that the community craved. Our review found evidence of systematic misuse of association funds, Thompson continued, projecting the unauthorized transactions onto a screen. Specifically, the $150 monthly payment labeled Administrative Services was directed to a personal account held by Ms. Peterson. This payment violates Article 7, Section 3 of the HOA bylaws, which explicitly prohibits compensation for board members or the president. This sum, accumulating over 2 years, constitutes unauthorized appropriation of association funds. Brenda slammed her hand on the table. That was reimbursement. For my time, for my coffee, for the sheer effort I put in that nobody else would. Mr. Thompson didn't flinch. Reimbursement requires receipts and itemized reports, Ms. Peterson. This was a recurring, unapproved direct deposit. We also identified significant legal fees, totaling over $5,000, spent pursuing injunctive relief against a homeowner, Mr. Carter, for a fully permitted structure. These funds were spent to pursue a private vendetta, representing a clear breach of fiduciary duty to the community. The board members exchanged looks of horror. They knew a breach of fiduciary duty could open them up to personal liability. It was Ethan's turn to speak. He stood up, addressing the board, not Brenda. The final argument for justice. Gentlemen and ladies of the board, this is no longer a civil dispute over offense. This is evidence of malfeasance, fraud, and a pattern of sustained abuse of power. Ms. Peterson didn't just break the rules. She weaponized the rules for her personal control and financial gain. You now have 2 choices. 1, you can attempt to defend these actions and risk personal legal exposure when the community inevitably sues the board for negligence in oversight. Or 2, you can rectify this immediately and demonstrate that the rule of law, not the tyranny of one individual, governs Willow Creek. Ethan then pulled out the damning exhibit provided by the neighbor, the email detailing the instruction to backdate official meeting minutes, and placed it on the table. This is the undeniable evidence of falsification of official records, a criminal, not just civil, matter, Ethan concluded quietly. The community has lost all trust. Your only recourse to restore integrity and mitigate liability is to remove the source of the rot. The board secretary, a middle-aged man named David, who had been quiet throughout the ordeal, finally broke the silence. He looked at Brenda, his face etched with exhaustion and disgust. "Brenda," he said, his voice flat, "the audit and this new evidence are irrefutable. We as a board cannot legally or ethically defend you. We have to protect the association now." The other board members quickly agreed. The votes were unanimous, 6-0. Brenda Peterson, the board secretary, announced formally, reading from a pre-drafted resolution. Based on the findings of the external audit detailing a clear and continuous breach of fiduciary duty, unauthorized use of association funds, and proven falsification of official records, the Board of Directors hereby demands your immediate resignation from the office of President and from the board itself. If you refuse, the board will move to officially remove you and pursue criminal charges based on the evidence of fraud. Brenda's composure completely collapsed. She stood up, knocking her chair over backward. Her face was streaked with tears and rage. "You are all weak. Traitors. I was the only one who cared about this community. I'll see you all in court," she shrieked, grabbing her handbag. But the threat was hollow. She was exposed, alone, and facing real legal trouble, not just HOA drama. Without another word, she stormed out of the clubhouse, leaving behind the mess she had created and the chair she had abandoned. The board breathed a collective sigh of relief. The tyrant had been deposed not by a mob, but by the relentless application of her own bylaws and financial regulations. Justice, for the first time in years, had prevailed in Willow Creek. The immediate aftermath of Brenda Peterson's forced resignation was one of stunned silence, quickly followed by a palpable sense of relief that swept through Willow Creek. The air felt lighter. Neighbors smiled at each other again. The era of petty tyranny, enforced by arbitrary fines and backdated minutes, was over. Brenda, true to form, attempted a final, theatrical flourish. She contacted the local news channels, claiming she was the victim of a politically motivated smear campaign led by a rogue government employee, Ethan. However, when the reporters checked the public records and saw the county's official inquiry into the Miller balcony and the damning audit report detailing the unapproved 150 payments, the story quickly evaporated. Brenda faded into obscurity, her control completely dissolved. Within a month, her house was listed for sale. The HOA drama had finally become too hot, even for her. The remaining 6 board members were shell-shocked. They had survived the scandal, but were crippled by distrust and the massive administrative task of undoing Brenda's illegal decisions. They immediately dissolved the illegally constituted ARC and held a series of emergency meetings to stabilize the association. Ethan, having successfully achieved his goal of justice and legal vindication, wanted nothing more than to return to his quiet life of inspecting structural loads and measuring setbacks. But the community had other ideas. 2 weeks after Brenda's departure, a General Assembly meeting was held to elect a new president and reconstitute the board. The atmosphere was constructive and almost celebratory. Old Man Jerry and several other long-suffering homeowners showed up, advocating for a new era of transparent governance. During the nomination process, David Jenkins, the board secretary who had finally stood up to Brenda, took the microphone. "We owe the restoration of this community to one man," Jenkins announced, looking directly at Ethan, who was sitting near the back, hoping to be overlooked. "He showed us that the rules are there to protect us, not punish us. He taught us the true power of due process. We need legal knowledge and integrity now more than ever." Jenkins paused for dramatic effect. "Therefore, I formally nominate Ethan Carter for the position of President of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association." A wave of applause and cheers erupted. Ethan found himself reluctantly standing as the entire room looked at him. Ethan approached the podium, not as an inspector or a plaintiff, but as a homeowner. He smiled faintly. "Thank you, David, and thank you, everyone." "That is a profound honor," Ethan began, his voice warm but firm. "However, I must respectfully decline the nomination." The room quieted with disappointed murmurs. "My passion is ensuring compliance and safety at the county level. My job is to protect all citizens, not just this subdivision," Ethan explained. "More importantly, the purpose of this fight was not for me to replace one ruler with another. The purpose was to prove that the system can work if you understand and enforce the rules fairly. You don't need a sheriff. You need a fair procedure." He pointed to the newly established election paperwork. "You need to elect a president who will commit to full transparency and rebuild the ARC with 3 legally compliant non-board members as the CC&Rs demand. Your victory is in electing from within your community, not appointing another outside authority." Ethan did, however, offer a compromise that fully satisfied the community's desire for lasting security. "I will accept a temporary, non-voting position as a pro bono procedural advisor for the next 6 months," he offered. "I will ensure that the new board correctly establishes the ARC, drafts new, clear finding policies that protect homeowners' rights, and most importantly, I will personally review the legal standing of every approval Brenda made, helping you mitigate your liability." The board and the community cheered, accepting the offer enthusiastically. The new sheriff wasn't a president, but an indispensable legal guide, a much safer arrangement. Several weeks later, the Miller balcony had been legally demolished, replaced by a safe, permitted structure. The board was successfully running under a new, transparent president. Ethan was in his front yard clipping a loose vine from his cedar fence. It stood tall, straight, and perfectly compliant, a 6-foot monument to bureaucratic revenge. It wasn't just a fence anymore. It was the symbol of legal power overcoming petty tyranny. He heard David Jenkins approach from the sidewalk. "Hey, Ethan, just got the final report from the auditors. Brenda's being hit with a civil suit to recover all the unauthorized funds and legal fees," David said with a satisfied grin. "Justice is served," Ethan replied, stepping back to admire his work. "Indeed," David agreed. "That fence of yours, it really started something. You know, when Brenda first sent you that fine, she really thought she had the authority to control your life." Ethan leaned against the fence, looking down the quiet, rule-abiding street. He smiled, a genuine, powerful smile of satisfaction. "She just didn't realize," Ethan concluded, his voice low, final, and perfectly content. "I'm not just a neighbor. I'm the guy who signs the checks for the county. And you never want to pick a fight with the man who approves the foundation your whole world is built on." The conflict was over. and the power fantasy was fulfilled. Intelligent, legal action had permanently dismantled a clear villain, leaving behind a just and orderly system. The immediate aftermath of Brenda Peterson's forced resignation was one of stunned silence, quickly followed by a palpable sense of relief that swept through Willow Creek. The air felt lighter. Neighbors smiled at each other again. The era of petty tyranny, enforced by arbitrary fines and backdated minutes, was over. Brenda, true to form, attempted a final, theatrical flourish. She contacted the local news channels, claiming she was the victim of a politically motivated smear campaign led by a rogue government employee, Ethan. However, when the reporters checked the public records and saw the county's official inquiry into the Miller balcony and the damning audit report detailing the unapproved 150 payments, the story quickly evaporated. Brenda faded into obscurity, her control completely dissolved. Within a month, her house was listed for sale. The HOA drama had finally become too hot, even for her. The remaining 6 board members were shell-shocked. They had survived the scandal, but were crippled by distrust and the massive administrative task of undoing Brenda's illegal decisions. They immediately dissolved the illegally constituted ARC and held a series of emergency meetings to stabilize the association. Ethan, having successfully achieved his goal of justice and legal vindication, wanted nothing more than to return to his quiet life of inspecting structural loads and measuring setbacks. But the community had other ideas. 2 weeks after Brenda's departure, a General Assembly meeting was held to elect a new president and reconstitute the board. The atmosphere was constructive and almost celebratory. Old Man Jerry and several other long-suffering homeowners showed up, advocating for a new era of transparent governance. During the nomination process, David Jenkins, the board secretary who had finally stood up to Brenda, took the microphone. "We owe the restoration of this community to one man," Jenkins announced, looking directly at Ethan, who was sitting near the back, hoping to be overlooked. "He showed us that the rules are there to protect us, not punish us. He taught us the true power of due process. We need legal knowledge and integrity now more than ever." Jenkins paused for dramatic effect. "Therefore, I formally nominate Ethan Carter for the position of President of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association." A wave of applause and cheers erupted. Ethan found himself reluctantly standing as the entire room looked at him. Ethan approached the podium, not as an inspector or a plaintiff, but as a homeowner. He smiled faintly. "Thank you, David, and thank you, everyone." "That is a profound honor," Ethan began, his voice warm but firm. "However, I must respectfully decline the nomination." The room quieted with disappointed murmurs. "My passion is ensuring compliance and safety at the county level. My job is to protect all citizens, not just this subdivision," Ethan explained. "More importantly, the purpose of this fight was not for me to replace one ruler with another. The purpose was to prove that the system can work if you understand and enforce the rules fairly. You don't need a sheriff. You need a fair procedure." He pointed to the newly established election paperwork. "You need to elect a president who will commit to full transparency and rebuild the ARC with 3 legally compliant non-board members as the CC&Rs demand. Your victory is in electing from within your community, not appointing another outside authority." Ethan did, however, offer a compromise that fully satisfied the community's desire for lasting security. "I will accept a temporary, non-voting position as a pro bono procedural advisor for the next 6 months, he offered. "I will ensure that the new board correctly establishes the ARC, drafts new, clear fining policies that protect homeowners' rights, and most importantly, I will personally review the legal standing of every approval Brenda made, helping you mitigate your liability." The board and the community cheered, accepting the offer enthusiastically. The new sheriff wasn't a president, but an indispensable legal guide, a much safer arrangement. Several weeks later, the Miller balcony had been legally demolished, replaced by a safe, permitted structure. The board was successfully running under a new, transparent president. Ethan was in his front yard clipping a loose vine from his cedar fence. It stood tall, straight, and perfectly compliant, a 6-foot monument to bureaucratic revenge. It wasn't just a fence anymore. It was the symbol of legal power overcoming petty tyranny. He heard David Jenkins approach from the sidewalk. "Hey, Ethan, just got the final report from the auditors. Brenda's being hit with a civil suit to recover all the unauthorized funds and legal fees," David said with a satisfied grin. "Justice is served. Ethan replied, stepping back to admire his work. Indeed, David agreed. That fence of yours, it really started something. You know, when Brenda first sent you that fine, she really thought she had the authority to control your life. Ethan leaned against the fence, looking down the quiet, rule-abiding street. He smiled, a genuine, powerful smile of satisfaction. She just didn't realize, Ethan concluded, his voice low, final, and perfectly content. I'm not just a neighbor. I'm the guy who signs the checks for the county. And you never want to pick a fight with the man who approves the foundation your whole world is built on. The conflict was over, and the power fantasy was fulfilled. Intelligent, legal action had permanently dismantled a clear villain, leaving behind a just and orderly system.